Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story Podcast. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating and creative young woman. Welcome to our tribe. Before I get started, let me acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So because I'm here in Australia, I normally live in New Zealand. I like to acknowledge the owners of this land for allowing me to be in this space and to be able to broadcast these amazing stories from women from all over the world. So welcome, Becky. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hello. It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here. My name is Becky Tahel. I am from Los Angeles, California. This is where I currently live, and I'm 35 years old. My story spans what feels like many lifetimes, but we'll talk about this one in particular. I was born in Israel and raised in Philadelphia. We moved when I was very little. And for me, it was always about fitting in and carving out an identity that felt right. And that has been a through line in many ways of my story. And growing up in Philadelphia, as a child of immigrants, as an immigrant myself, it wasn't easy to figure out my story, figure out who I am, figure out what I stand for. And as I went to college for communication and theater and put on many masks of an actress, I realized that there was more out there, that there was a deeper calling. And I found a lot of my callings answered in California. And so right after college, moved out to Los Angeles, found rooting rather quickly. I became an assistant and started to piece out what I was being called to LA to do. It was clear to me that I wanted to create. It just wasn't as clear to me exactly how. So as I journeyed through Los Angeles, as many do, sort of bumping around into things, trying to figure out what it is I'm meant to do, I got very lucky to babysit for a celebrity family. The father had been an actor since he was a child, and they took me in to be their nanny. And very quickly, he realized that I wasn't really a nanny and that I should be creating my work, and passed me on to a colleague of his who I started assisting. And very shortly, during that time, I started to audition, and I booked a role as the matzo ball maker of a J-Date commercial. And so J-Date's like this Jewish dating platform, and I became the face of like the Jewish young single. And that was funny because, of course, being a Jewish girl, single in Los Angeles, that felt very much the rightful role. And at the same time, my sister, my younger sister, like the constitution of the good Jewish daughter, set to be a doctor in medical school, straight A's, right? All of the things that, for me, a little bit differently, that wasn't necessarily my track. I was trying to become an actress in Los Angeles without such clear direction. My younger sister gets engaged to a non-Jew. And as Jews, to me, that wasn't a part of sort of what we were indoctrinated and brought up to believe was optimal. Jews marry other Jews. We're such a small people. And so interfaith marriage, and marrying outside of the faith was sort of frowned upon in my family. And so I was really bumped by my sister's decision to marry a non-Jew, and felt really judgmental of myself. I was like, why do I feel so bumped by this? Like, why can't I just be the cool older sister that's just really happy my sister's found love? What is this about? And so naturally, in that moment, I felt like, though this is my story, this is the story. Is this a piece of my soul's work that I'm meant to do? Is to shine light on this topic that I'm sure I'm not the only one walking with. Like, I'm sure there are others struggling with this sort of synthesizing of culture and faith and religion with being a modern person walking around and, the 20th century at the time. So I dove into creating a documentary, and 7 years later, it has now been birthed into the world. It has been in the film festival circuit for the last year, doing rather well. We've won Best Director at Idlewild International, and Best Documentary was the audience choice at Seattle Jewish Film Festival. We've been in over a dozen other film festivals, and it's been very, very overwhelming and wonderful and exciting to see this film out in the world. But really the story here is that through my own experience being bumped by my sister's decision to do something that felt so counter to what we were raised with, I found my own vulnerability. I found my own authenticity, and I found my own voice. And as opposed to just being sort of like, bumped by it and not wanting to deal with it, I ran into the discomfort, and from that place created a film that is what we're finding, helping other people to ask the bigger questions of themselves. Who are they? What means anything to them, right? So the initial question I ask in the documentary is, why marry Jewish? Why is that such a thing? And other wisdom traditions, of course, are reflecting onto that question, their own questions. Why marry Catholic? Why marry Hindu? Why marry Buddhist? Why marry whatever religion you're from? Why marry Muslim? And what I found that happens when you walk with a question long enough and truthfully enough is that you often uncover there's a deeper question waiting to be birthed. And that's what happened to me. That 2 years after asking that initial question and trying to make this piece, I found that there was a deeper question waiting to be birthed. And that question was, why be Jewish? Why be anything? Why self-identify in that sort of way with a wisdom tradition that I was born into? And I was very much confronted with these larger questions of spirituality, of religious association, and of values, deep core values. And I realized that if I could answer the second question, why be Jewish, I could then circle back to that initial question, why marry Jewish, and have a truthful answer to me, not one that serves my family, not one that necessarily serves what I've been told is right. And if you watch the documentary, I don't want to spoil it, I do come out the other side with clarity, and that has been a blessing in my life. But more than that, the film has been sparking that sort of internal dialogue with others, and having them question their own sets of values, their own clarity, and their own direction in life. And I think that is the power of film, is that, much like we walk out of the Karate Kid wanting to kick like the Karate Kid, or for me, it was Free Willy. I remember walking out of the movie theater, like really wanting a whale. It was not very logistically sound, but that idea that we so resonate with a protagonist and that we find ourselves sort of drawn into their story, and it's a mirror for us in many ways. We watch the protagonist pack up their bags and fly off to pursue truth, and we think to ourselves, well, if she could do it, if he can do it, then I can do it. And that is such a powerful piece of what I feel like, mindful media is about, and what I've committed myself to continuing to do is to tell powerful stories. This one happens to be my own, but I find myself helping to create stories based on not just myself or things that I'm drawn to, but many important pieces and stories that need to be shared in the world. Not just to share them and simply to entertain, though I think that is very valuable. We should all be entertained, and that is absolutely a value of mine, to entertain, but also to cause us to really think deeper, to consciously create our lives, and to live a more meaningful existence. So to me, the ideal marriage in film is that there's like a really compelling story that also somehow helps us to dig deep and to come forth with more of ourselves, and to leave the movie a different person, a changed person. So now, 7 years after having started this film, and a year after having birthed it, I am back in LA. My husband and I just took a year off on the road during COVID in an RV with our toddler, and traveled around and saw the rest of the country. And we're back in LA, carving out our production company and continuing to do good work. And I'm so excited to continue to share my story, to use my vulnerability and the things that were not necessarily easy for me to confront. Certainly hasn't been an easy time and an easy journey. But I think that's our shared currency, is our mess. And for so long, that hasn't been a really cool thing to share. And I'm really glad that people are stepping into their mess. They're stepping into their authenticity and their vulnerability and their fears, their concerns, their big questions. And so the sort of the movement that I'm eager to create and sustain is this walking with questions, to really own up to our questions. What are the burning questions inside of us? Because if you can own a question, whether it's small or whether it's large, you've created the vessel for that wisdom to pour in. But until you ask the question, it's like you yourself are not acknowledging that it exists. And so there's no space for any clarity to come in. So may we all own our questions, ask them boldly, and be open to the wisdom that comes in, because it can really change our life. And change is scary. And we don't often want to take it on because it might mean that things are a little rocky, or they're not the same, or maybe life doesn't look the same. But I guarantee that past that point of the initial fear, because I went through it, comes a whole lot of beauty and openness and clarity that up levels you in ways you never, ever saw coming. So to me, it's all about owning the questions and creating from that place. I think you're muted. Yay.
What an amazing story. Now, you have defied all odds with what you've done. You went against the grain of everything. How has this been perceived by your community? I know the Jewish community is very tightly knit.
Yes, I appreciate you asking that. So, initially there was fear. There's a lot of anxiety around sort of like, okay, this is a big hot button question. What exactly is the agenda here? Like, what is the final message and what are you going to do with this? Because if you look at the current media that we see, most of what's representative of the Jewish world is not always so positive.
Wow.
And that's, to me, that's a big bummer. There's such a diverse, colorful tapestry that is Jewish practice. And often it's just not brought to the screen in a way that I feel is truthful and that I feel is as dynamic and open and just captivating. So to me, I just kept saying that, like, trust me. I think this is going to be a wonderful piece that will really educate non-Jews about Judaism, but also have Jews embracing their own Judaism in a really unique way. And it's done both. It's done the both. And I'm so glad, because I didn't want to just speak to it and then it not happen. I'm so glad that it has done that.
So if I could take you back to the younger you, that young woman who had this dream, who had this vision, who was fearful, unsure of what the future had to give, if you could give her 3 nuggets of wisdom, let's just say there's somebody listening to us right now trying to make a similar decision, what 3 nuggets of wisdom would you give her?
I wish someone told me that when something is hard, that is the exact sign that you are doing the right thing and that growth is imminent. Hard equals you're in the right place, growth is coming, hang tight, keep going, yay. That's number one. So when things are tough, and I keep reminding myself, that's my mantra, this is hard, that means I'm growing, this is wonderful, I'm going to come out the other side stronger. The second piece is that having a question and it bringing about change is not weakness. I used to think that admitting that I needed to change was a bad thing because it means I made a mistake. And so what I was doing before was not good. And the fact that I need to change means that I wasn't good. And that is so false. Change is power. Change is constant. Change is life. Change is human. And to admit change is a powerful, wonderful thing that strong, conscious humans do. And so don't be afraid of change, and don't be afraid of asking the questions that might lead to change, because that is human and that is living. People who are not asking questions and are not changing are staying in a comfort zone and are not really embracing life. So change. And the final thing that I wish I could go back and tell my younger self is that there is no perfect. There is no perfect. And it was really difficult for me in making a film because I initially didn't want to put anything on the screen due to fear of it being perceived in some way and being misperceived and it coming across wrong. And then I realized that if I can come from an honest place, that'll never be wrong. That'll never be wrong. If I can speak to it, if I'm being honest and true to myself, and I create from that place, what comes from the heart goes into the heart. So there's really no way to lose if you're creating from a heartfelt place, because in that space, from that space, only good can be created and no one can judge you for that.
Oh, that is just absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, let me teleport you now into the future. Time is an illusion. Your past, your present, all exist in the same timeline. And you're now 100 years old. You're sitting on your porch, surrounded by your children and your grandchildren. If you could have a conversation with that older woman, that wise woman, what would you say to her based on how you're living your life right now?
I love this exercise and I try to tap into that older self often. And thank you for this invitation. I wish I could say to her and even ask her, because I feel like that would be really helpful for me right now, is why did I waste so much time? And maybe even asking her, what would you say was time wasted? What was a waste? And I hear her saying back to me, oh, nothing's a waste. Everything happens for a reason, right? But if I'm going to be really honest with you, maybe all that worrying and all of that fussing about little details that no one really cares about, and all of that waiting until you're ready, and all of that fear based on not having enough money or resources or knowing enough or being enough, like all of that is a waste. Though it's helpful and constructive because it's getting you to where you need to be. And so fine, let's not, you can still have it, but that is a waste. So I'd love to know what fat I can trim. Where can I trim in my life right now, areas that are sucking up my energy? And I feel like my 100-year-old self could look back and tell me, oh, those areas, those are fat. You could trim them. So it'd be really nice to get that sort of clarity. And I think I would also ask her, if you could do anything differently, what would you do? And I think in my life, there have been several pivots where I've been at a crossroads and it was like a choose your own adventure. And I had to reconcile either between my heart and my head, what made sense logically, financially, logistically, just generally, and what felt right and what I really wanted and what gave me joy. And in many moments, I've had to go with my head because yes, this makes me really happy. But does it serve me? Does it serve my future? Does it serve the things that I want? Is it actually solid and realistic and pragmatic? But sometimes I get tripped up and I don't really know. I don't actually really know if my head is my heart or my heart is my head. And in those moments, it would be really nice to get the guidance. And I'm at a crossroads now, I was just journaling about it. I'm a new mom and I'm pregnant with my second. I'm due in July. And stepping into motherhood is such a wild new journey. It's like, more difficult than any film I've ever made. And it is its own production. And every child, I say, is like a movie and they grow in their own way. But I'd love to know, what is it that I need to be doing more of? And what is it that I need to be doing less of? And do I pursue more of the creative production written work, or do I double back and take on more acting roles, or is it an either or? And is there maybe something else that I'm being called to do? Is it step into education with my films and create curriculums and go out into the world and teach? So I'd love to get some clarity. And even as I ask, I think I already hear her and I get the clarity, and maybe it's all of it, but I'd love to know.
That is just beautiful. Well, I believe that time is an illusion, that you are born with all of these answers. When I struggle, like I've been working on a movie script as well, I ask my future self, what's the next scene, or what is the next step? And through my dreams, she percolates and she guides me. And I wake up with those aha moments, but you have all the answers. They're already there. And she's just waiting in the future for you to catch up with her. So tap into the essence of her and you'll figure it out.
Oh, thank you. That was such a perfect nugget for tonight. I so needed that. Thank you, sister.
Thank you so much for coming online and gracing us with your amazing presence. Good luck with this film. I'm going to ask you to book another appointment to connect with me next week because there's some other things I think you and I need to talk about. It's kind of percolating in my head right now as you're speaking.
Great.
But thank you to everybody who's tuned in. The Her Story movement is attracting some phenomenal women. Please come back again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing story. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Bye for now. Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you.